Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we're back and ready for today's special guest, the sports director at WGN Radio, the voice of Northwestern Athletics. Please welcome Dave Eanet to the program. Dave, it's great to have you on. How are you?
John, always good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you, too. Thank you for being here, making the time. What did you make of the Bears-Dolphins game, first off? Let's start there.
Well, I think probably like everybody, right? I'm like, too bad they have to wait till Sunday to play again. I think it's pretty exciting to see what's happened, to see the steps that Justin Fields has taken, that the offense has taken. I think that Chase Claypool is going to be a nice addition offensively. And, it's funny when you get a couple of things clicking, it seems like some of the areas where you were really concerned a few weeks ago about how this is going, the offensive line suddenly looks a little better. And, so I think there's a lot of good stuff happening there. I think people are excited. And I know there's a tendency on the part of Chicago fans to not get overly excited because we've been there before. We've been teased. But I think in this case, if you look at what the national perspective is on this, just get outside of our parochialism here and look at what people are saying around the country about what the Bears did and potentially might do. I think then you can look at it and say, hey, this seems pretty legit.
Is this what you expected when the Bears drafted Justin Fields out of college? You watched him play a lot at Ohio State. Is this something that you were waiting for to happen?
Well, let me put it this way. You've asked me about this before, and I think I've told you that I always thought when I watched him play in college that this guy is what you want in a quarterback in 2021 when they drafted him, and what you want in the NFL in 2022. And yeah, I think there's a potential. You never know. And look, he's still got a long way to go. I don't think anyone's saying that he's a finished product by any stretch, but I do think that you look at this and you think, okay, this was a guy who rarely lost a game in college. Granted, he had a great talent around him, and a great system, and obviously a landmark institution. But he was also really accurate, could make all the throws, and he had that added dimension of mobility and the ability to make plays with his legs. And I think that you've really seen that now on the NFL stage. And look, how many guys could do what he did on Sunday? How many guys can make a play like that on that 61-yard touchdown? And to me, ultimately, he's probably not going to be running as much as he is right now. You would kind of hope that maybe he won't be, because he'll continue to develop as a passer. But for right now, and the fact he'll always, at least you would hope for a long time, have that ability, I think that's a pretty good weapon to have in your arsenal.
How sustainable do you think this offensive scheme is?
Well, I don't see why it's not going to be. Now, obviously, there's always the flavor of the month in the NFL, right? And people figure out they scheme to stop it, and they'll come up with something. So then you try to out-scheme them. So you just have to stay a step ahead. But I think that this isn't all smoke and mirrors out there. That's the difference. This isn't something that's just Luke Getsy is a mad scientist and dreamt this up. This is something that I think it's still football, and it's still they're not reinventing the wheel here. So I think it's pretty sustainable. I just think you do have to be concerned over the long haul of the constant hits that Fields would take, and you want to try to minimize that.
What do the Bears need to do to still build around him? What weapons should they be looking at in the offseason moving into next year?
Well, a defense would be nice. But no, seriously, look, they still need more. They need more playmakers on offense. I think they've got a good start with Mooney, and I think certainly Claypool, as I said, I think is going to be a nice addition. I think they have a nice 1-2 punch at running back if they continue down that line. We don't really know what Velus Jones is going to be and what role he'll play in this offense. I like the fact that gone to the tight end now more, that Cole Kmet's becoming more a part of the offense. I think ultimately, John, you have to look at the offensive line. If you're going to have success offensively long term, you're going to have an offensive line. And if you look at the Bears' success in the Walter Payton era, what did Jim Finks do? He went out and drafted offensive linemen back to back, first round. And then if you look at what they did when they built the Super Bowl team, it was building that offensive line. And so I think that's still as important as any, especially if you want to keep Justin Fields in one piece.
If they do that for next year, could they be on track for potentially a playoff appearance or even more?
I mean, you see teams turn things around so quickly now in the NFL. I don't see why not. Look, they're 3-6 now. Their record certainly could be a little worse, but it could be a little better than that. And if it were a little better than that, we'd probably be having a different conversation about looking over the final 7 games, how realistic is a wild card spot for them. And if you look at the division, Minnesota looks pretty good, right? They're running away with the NFC North. But are we witnessing? I'm not ready to write off the Packers long term. I mean, I'm not ready to say this is it. Rodgers has lost it. They're never going to contend again in the NFC North. I don't think that's true. But I do think that you could see how quickly you can put yourself in position. And look at the NFC East. I mean, look at the Giants. And this was a division where Washington won the division a year or two ago, where they weren't even over 500. I don't think any team was over 500 in that division. And now the entire division's over 500, and Philadelphia is undefeated. So, I think you make a couple shrewd moves. You've got some money to spend in free agency. You could put yourself in position to contend next year. I don't think there's too much question. It doesn't mean you will, but I think you've got the ability to do that.
How do you explain the Packers collapse? I know you mentioned them. I just want your take on that.
It's weird. I mean, every time I've watched them, and I have watched them some, I've seen a guy drop a pass. It seems like really they got kind of spoiled there with great receivers over the course of time who made a lot of plays to help out Favre, and then help out Rodgers when those guys were in trouble. And they've had a consistent time here where they transitioned from one quarterback to another, MVP caliber quarterbacks, but they always had guys who catch the ball. And now they've got some young receivers, and maybe they'll turn out to be okay. But I think you look at, it's not dissimilar to the Bears, except they have a more accomplished guy behind center, but they don't have the guys at the skill positions that they've traditionally had.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the main thing with Justin Fields is he needs some wide receiving weapons, and it's pretty funny because the Packers kind of have a parallel there. They don't have any wide receiving weapons. I think the difference is, though, Aaron Rodgers is very vocal about complaining. Justin Fields is pretty silent.
And different places, different places in their careers. Now, maybe 14 years from now, Justin Fields in the same situation would be a lot more outspoken. But I think at this point, he also realizes he's got to know that he's not where he's going to need to be eventually. So far be it from him now to start complaining about not having guys to throw to, because you got to show more before you can take that kind of a stand.
Hey, Bennett here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dave, let's talk Northwestern now. What's wrong with Northwestern football?
Well, I think if you're going to look at one thing, John, this year, it's been, and really the last 2 years, it's been inconsistent play on offense. And certainly defense has been a big part of that. Don't get me wrong. But you're looking at a team which has turned the football over 41 times since the start of the 2021 season. Wow. 22 times last year, 19 times so far this year. And opponents, last time, I think I've got these numbers right. I don't have all my stats in front of me, but I believe they've been outscored in points off turnovers, something like 45-7. And that's a crusher. Look, I mean, you're setting the other team up, and it's not like they're throwing pick sixes all the time. The other team's running them back, but they're giving teams short fields, which puts a lot of pressure on the defense, and that's happened on a pretty regular basis. Now, ironically, they did not turn the ball over for the first time this season on a tough day weather-wise on Saturday against Ohio State, which is a pretty good team when it comes to taking the ball away. But I think there've been some turnovers by guys who don't normally turn the football over also, and clearly they haven't had consistent play at the quarterback position, and that's been an issue now for them. It was an issue last year. In 2020, they had Peyton Ramsey come in, and he was terrific for that 1 year as a graduate transfer. Last year, they had different guys in there, as they did in 2019, by the way. And it was Hunter Johnson, it was Andrew Marty, it was Ryan Helinski. This year, Helinski played really well early in the season, but then he hit a rough patch. Then they brought in the redshirt freshman Brendan Sullivan, and quite frankly, John, I think he looks pretty good. And I thought Helinski looked good against Nebraska and threw for over 400 yards against Duke, but they weren't able to sustain that. I think Sullivan looks like a guy who is going to get better, and he's got a little bit of kind of, you can kind of see the growth curve that Justin Fields is going through with the Bears, where sometimes he's able to make plays, keep plays alive, buy some time with his legs. And I think it's a question though. It's still the learning process with him, and he did get knocked out of the game late against Ohio State. So I don't even know what his status is for their upcoming games.
Do you think he's going to be? Well, let me ask you this instead. What makes him better than Helinski?
Well, I don't know that he is. I mean, I think you need more of a body of work. He's started 3 games, but I do think certainly the mobility has been evident. He seems to he's shown some command there and been able to move the team. I mean, even their loss to Iowa, look, a lot of teams have struggled against that Iowa defense, including Purdue this past Saturday. But I think he's for a guy who hasn't played before at this level. I think he's come in. He shows some confidence. He's got a little swagger to him, which I don't think is a bad thing. So I don't know, but my sense is just early on watching him that there's some potential there, and also what he's shown on the practice field, I think, was enough to create a head-to-head battle with Helinski before the season for that starting quarterback job. He easily could have been the guy starting in Dublin against Nebraska instead of Helinski, but I think Fitz at that point went with the more experienced guy, and a guy who also had a real strong preseason, and that paid off. That decision certainly proved to be a good one for them.
You think Fitz is going to be on the hot seat after this season? Are you hearing anything about that?
I don't think he's going to be on the hot seat. I really don't. Look at his body of work this is his 17th year, and there's no question. There's nobody who's agonizing over what's happened to them the last 2 seasons more than he is. This is not typical of what they've been. And remember, they had a bad year in 2019, and it was kind of similar. They really had instability at the quarterback position. But their defense was still good enough. Their defense was still solid, and if they'd had any kind of decent play at quarterback, they would have been in a bowl game and maybe contended again in the Big Ten West, which they had won the year before and which they won the year after. But I think we looked at 2019, and I remember saying this on a lot of shows I went on. I think you look at that as the anomaly that season, and I felt that way again in 2021 when they had a bad year. I said, look, they went 3-9 in 19. They went 3-9 last year, and I said that's not what this program has been, dating back to pretty much throughout since 1995, since Gary Barnett took the purple to Pasadena, and then Randy Walker won a Big Ten championship in 2000. I mean, this has been a team that's consistently gone to bowl games. They've gone to 10 bowl games under Pat Fitzgerald. So I don't think you turn around and you have a couple of bad years and you say, get this guy out of here, especially when he's not only maybe the face of the football program. You could argue he's the face of the university in some respects. So, yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of soul searching, a lot of uh, just reviewing everything they've done, and he's done it before when they've been had a bad year, and they've come back and turned things around the following year.
Could next year be better for Northwestern? Do you see a path to maybe a bowl appearance for next year?
Well, I do, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it's been a very young defense, and they really struggled last year because look, they had these guys, who had played their linebacking core. They still had Chris Bergen last year, who led the nation in tackles, but the guys alongside him, Patty Fisher and Blake Gallagher, had moved on. Now Blake's younger brother Bryce is their middle linebacker, and he's among the Big Ten leaders in tackles, and he's really come on now in his second year as a starter. I think we've seen a lot of improvement there, as well as the guy playing alongside him is Xander Mueller. So I think that the heart of that defense is getting better. They certainly against Michigan, against Ohio State on Saturday, they played better. They tackled a lot better than they had been. That's been an issue for them. I think their secondary played great, and I know everybody talks about the win being a factor, but still, I mean, you're talking about as accurate the number one rated quarterback in the nation in FBS football in terms of his accuracy, CJ Stroud. And so, yeah, I know he misfired on some passes. He's got a great receiving core, and they held him to his Ohio State low. So I think, I think there's some room for growth there, certainly, but I think that they're starting to make some strides. Now they got a lot of work to do because they've still given up big plays at inopportune moments. But I think those are things you can get better at. And I think they got some guys. Like I say, I think the secondary, which by the way is missing a key guy, has been since early in the season. Coco Osmo is out for the year with an injury, but he's the guy who provides a lot of juice back there. I think they've got the potential to make some strides. Plus, they've got some guys who aren't playing yet, who will, maybe seeing the field here and there here as they play that freshman save the red shirt thing here the last few games of the season.
Dave Eanet still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dave, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, Ireland. Tell me about your trip to Dublin for Northwestern.
I loved it, John. I thought it was absolutely terrific, and it was just a great experience. Sometimes you take these kinds of trips, and whether it's a bowl game or a basketball tournament, but there's travel issues, there's problems, the hotel's in a bad location, it could be any number of things, but there's always, no matter how good it might be, there's always going to be a little grumbling about something. And I have to tell you, we were there. We left on a Tuesday afternoon from O'Hare, got there at the crack of dawn on Wednesday, and returned the following Monday. And I didn't hear one single, there may have been some complaints that didn't come my way, but I didn't hear anybody complain. I thought everyone had a wonderful time. Now, did it help to win the football game? Absolutely. It would have been kind of a bummer to go over there and lose, go all that way. But I can tell you that I think the experience still would have been very worthwhile. I think from everything I could tell, the players enjoyed it. The traveling party enjoyed it. They had a ton of alumni make the trip over there. And I think that the people of Dublin were so welcoming and so they were so into it and really I think embraced the whole concept of it. And I thought it was just a really cool experience. I had my son with me and he works with me in the booth, and so he and I got to go out and explore the city some and yeah, I think it's one of those things I will cherish the memories of that week.
What do you do non-football related that you're going to remember most about that trip?
Well, it's funny. We went one day. I guess now I'm thinking back on it because we went to practice first couple of days, and I think it was later in the week. Might have been Thursday, might have been Friday. He and I took a train to a town right on the sea and went hiking. up in the hills along the cliffs along the seashore there, and then went to a local pub that was kind of a landmark and had lunch. He really wanted fish and chips, and had a couple of pints. And yeah, that was just a real nice day. Just him and me. We just had a really good time. And then the day after the game on Sunday, one of the things Fitz did, he wanted to make sure that everybody had a day. He wanted to make sure they had a bye the following week, which they did. But he also wanted to make sure they had the extra day there so they could see the city. So the players, a lot of their families made the trip. So you want to give them a little time to hang out, right? So we made sure that we had Sunday free. And like I said, it's a good thing they won the game, because Sunday would have been a little bit of a drag if it still would have been good, but it's a little different when you've won the game. But my son and I took an e-bike tour of Dublin, which was, I'd never ridden an e-bike. He's ridden the Divvy e-bikes here, but that was a really cool way to see the city. We went all over. We saw different parts of the city we hadn't had the opportunity to see during the course of the week. Saw churches and museums and just different areas that were beautiful. And it was just a lot of fun in a great way, even though it was a little scary at first, because first of all, you're driving on the wrong side of the road, at least as far as we're concerned. So that took a little getting used to, but it was just, I will look back on that very fondly.
Hey, before we finish up today, last question. What's the funniest speed joke you've heard? Putting you on the spot here.
My favorite speed joke, and John Williams' speed jokes, is they're not making rulers any longer.
Oh, okay. I get it. Yep, I get it.
It's
a minute there.
Some of these, see, the idea behind the speed jokes, and I don't know if people realize this. John started this at the beginning of the pandemic, because if you remember, we were all walking around. People were dazed. They were worried. They were scared. There was an awful lot of bad news. And so he thought, let's take a couple minutes every day to just rattle off just a series of jokes just to give everybody a look. There's no way he thought we'd still be doing this over 2 years later. And along the way, I became part of this. And so he asked me, when he told that ruler joke, it took me a minute, just like it took you a minute. And the more I thought about it, it's the ideal speed joke, because they have to be fast. And you have to be able to get the punchline pretty quick. And I, for some reason, that one stuck with me.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate the time. Best wishes at Northwestern and WGN, and looking forward to the next time we chat as well.
John, always great being with you. Continued success. Thanks for having me.